Imagine stepping onto a tennis court, right? You grab your racket, you look across the net.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
But instead of a single opponent gently lobbing a ball your way, you are facing a literal wall of 10 highly pressurized tennis ball machines.
Oh, man. That sounds terrifying.
Right. And someone just flips a switch, and suddenly 100 tennis balls are fired at you simultaneously.
You just panic. You can't even swing at that.
Exactly. You can't track them. You definitely can't hit them. And you basically just end up covering your head while they bounce off you.
Yeah, you're just in pure survival mode at that point.
And the thing is, when most of us try to learn a new language or really any complex new skill, that is exactly what it feels like to the human brain.
It's an absolute avalanche.
It is. You are dealing with this avalanche of unfamiliar vocabulary, completely foreign grammatical structures, and weird phonetic sounds you've literally never had to make with your mouth before.
Right, it's sensory overload.
Total sensory overload, which is why today's mission is just so incredibly relevant. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are tailoring this entire exploration specifically for you, the learner.
I love that we're doing this.
Me too. Whether you are tuning in because you're actively trying to pick up some Spanish for a trip, or maybe you design instructional courses for a living, or you're just fascinated by how the human brain actually acquires new information without just short-circuiting.
Which is a miracle in itself, honestly.
All right. Well, you have come to the right place, because our source material today is this highly specific, fascinating blueprint.
It really is a blueprint in every sense of the word.
Yeah, it's a foundational document, and it outlines the exact rules, the strict constraints, and the literal step-by-step structure for creating an interactive audio lesson for an A2 English learner.
And just to set the stage for everyone, A2 means elementary level, right?
Exactly. So these students aren't absolute day one beginners. They know a few words, but they are very much still in the shallow end of the pool, just trying to figure out how to swim without drowning.
And what stands out immediately when you read this document isn't just the content. I mean, it doesn't just say, teach these 10 words today.
Right. It's not a syllabus.
No, it's the sheer architectural precision of the delivery. The lesson designers are operating under these incredibly tight constraints.
It's almost mathematical.
It is. We are talking about mandated word counts for stories, strict numerical limits on sentence lengths, and hard-coded seconds of mandatory silence.
Which we are definitely going to get into because that blew my mind.
Oh, the silence rule is brilliant. But all of this mechanical precision, all these strict rules, they're actually deployed in service of this deeply empathetic psychological goal.
Yeah, it is essentially a blueprint for how to strip the fear out of learning.
Exactly.
And to really understand how it pulls that off, we have to start by looking at the environment this document forces the teacher to create.
The A2 safe space, essentially.
Right, because before a single vocabulary word is taught, before the lesson really even begins, the blueprint lays out a set of non-negotiable rules for the teacher's speaking style.
And they are very strict.
Super strict. The teacher must speak slowly and clearly, that's obvious, but they are strictly forbidden from using difficult grammar or idioms.
None at all. No colorful metaphors.
None. And if they absolutely have to use a complex word, they are mandated to immediately explain it in simple terms.
Right.
But, okay, the rule that I found absolutely fascinating here is the strict limit on sentence length.
Ah, the word count rule.
Yes, the blueprint explicitly commands the teacher to use short sentences, strictly capped between 5 and 12 words.
Not 3 words, not 15 words.
Always between 5 and 12. And looking at this 12-word maximum, I just kept thinking about how unnatural that must sound in practice.
It definitely changes the rhythm of how you speak.
Right, because if I spoke to you right now exclusively in 8-word sentences, for 20 minutes straight, you'd probably feel like you were talking to an automated customer service bot.
I would definitely think something was wrong with you. Yeah.
Exactly. It feels like we are putting these massive, heavy training wheels on the conversation. Doesn't that rigid structure completely destroy the natural flow of human speech?
Well, it definitely alters the flow, yes. But that is a deliberate and entirely necessary sacrifice.
Okay, why?
Because if we look at cognitive load theory, the rationale for that 12-word cap becomes crystal clear.
Break that down for me. Cognitive load theory.
So when you hear a sentence in your native language, your brain isn't actually processing individual words anymore.
Right, I'm just getting the gist of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're processing these large chunks of meaning effortlessly. You don't even think about the grammar. But when an A2 learner hears an English sentence, their brain is doing some Heavy, heavy computational lifting.
It's like a dial-up modem in there.
Perfect analogy. They're hearing a string of sounds, they're trying to separate those raw sounds into individual words, then they have to translate those words into their native language.
Which takes time.
A lot of time. And then they have to identify the main verb, figure out the time tense, and piece it all together. And they have to do all of that in real time while the speaker is already moving on to the next sentence.
So if the teacher throws out this beautifully crafted 25-word sentence full of dependent clauses and passive voice and colorful idioms,
The student's brain just drops the connection entirely.
they just get buried in the tennis ball.
Yes. It is the biological equivalent of a computer experiencing a buffer overflow. The working memory simply cannot hold that many unmapped variables at once. It just crashes.
Oh, wow. So the 12-word cap is literally a memory limit.
Exactly. By capping the sentence length at 12 words and demanding simple vocabulary, the instructional designer is actively engineering a safe space for the brain's processing center.
Keeping the cognitive load intentionally low.
Right. The training wheels aren't there to hold the learner back. They're there to guarantee the learner doesn't crash into a wall while they're just figuring out how to pedal the bike.
That makes total sense. It is all about bandwidth management.
100%.
And that bandwidth management actually serves a much higher purpose in this document because there is one specific directive in this blueprint that acts as the North Star for the entire lesson.
The golden rule.
The golden rule. The document explicitly commands the teacher to, quote, focus on speaking confidence more than grammar perfection.
And that one sentence right there, that is the philosophical anchor of the entire framework. Everything else in the document is built to support that.
It is such a massive departure from the traditional academic model, though.
Oh, completely.
I mean, think back to your high school language classes. The entire system was built around penalizing imperfection.
Red ink everywhere.
Exactly. You use the wrong preposition on a test. -5 points.
You conjugate a verb incorrectly in front of the class. The teacher immediately stops you and corrects you in front of everyone.
It's mortifying. But this blueprint is actively instructing the audio teacher to be friendly, to be endlessly encouraging, and to prioritize the student's psychological safety over their grammatical accuracy.
The creators of this framework clearly understand a concept in linguistics known as the affective filter.
The affective filter. Is that just the academic term for that, psychological wall we hit when we are absolutely terrified of looking stupid?
That is exactly what it is.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So the affective filter is a theory developed by linguist Stephen Kreischen, and it suggests that negative emotions, things like anxiety, fear of failure, self-doubt, they literally create a cognitive block in the brain.
Like a physical barrier to learning.
Yes. When the affective filter is up, the language acquisition part of your brain just shuts down. It goes offline. You could be sitting there surrounded by the best language input in the world, the best teacher, but your brain refuses to absorb any of it because it is in a state of high stress.
So the biggest barrier to learning a language isn't a lack of intelligence or a bad memory?
No, not at all. It is fear, pure and simple.
Because if you are terrified of making a mistake, you just keep your mouth shut.
Right. And if you don't speak, you can't build the physical skill of speaking. It's a vicious cycle.
So by prioritizing confidence over grammar perfection, the document is basically acknowledging that language learning is as much a psychological challenge as it is a cognitive one.
Exactly. The teacher's primary job in this A2 environment isn't to be a human dictionary, or a strict grammarian.
Right.
Their job is to keep that affective filter completely lowered so that the actual learning can penetrate the brain.
Okay, so we have this incredibly safe, highly calibrated environment established. The student isn't going to be overwhelmed by long sentences, and they aren't going to be shamed for grammar mistakes.
A perfect setup.
So how does the blueprint actually kick off the lesson? Well, the document breaks the beginning into 2 distinct phases, starting with a very, very tight warm-up.
And the parameters for that warm-up are remarkably strict.
Yeah, it must be completed in just 1 to 2 minutes, maximum.
Right. In that tiny, tiny window, that 120-second window, the teacher has to introduce today's topic, state explicitly what the learner is going to achieve by the end of the lesson, and ask 2 easy questions.
And that is it. There is literally no room for small talk.
None. And the efficiency there is absolutely vital.
Because of the cognitive load.
Exactly. For an A2 learner, every single English word requires physical and mental energy to process.
Right. They are translating everything.
So if the teacher opens the lesson with a long, rambling anecdote about their weekend, even if they're just trying to be friendly and build rapport.
It just sounds like a wall of incomprehensible noise.
Yes. The student burns through half their cognitive battery before the actual lesson even starts.
They're exhausted before they even get to the starting line. That's wild.
So by immediately stating the topic and the concrete learning goals, you are priming the learner's brain.
You're giving them the map before the journey.
Exactly. You are essentially handing them the labeled filing cabinet before you start handing them the files. Their brain knows exactly where to store the upcoming vocabulary.
And finishing that warm-up with 2 easy questions, that feels like a highly strategic move, too.
Oh, it is. It immediately shifts the dynamic.
It sets the terms of engagement, right? It tells the listener, hey, you are not here to passively consume an audio track. You are here to work.
It transitions them from a passive recipient of audio into an active participant. They have to wake up.
Which moves us right into the heavy lifting of the lesson. Because once the brain is primed, the blueprint outlines this rigorous, non-negotiable 5-step process for teaching a new vocabulary word.
And the discipline required of the lesson designer here is just staggering.
It really is. Let's walk through it. To teach a single word, the teacher must first pronounce the word clearly.
Makes sense.
Second, explain its meaning in simple English. Third, provide one easy, relatable example sentence.
Right, putting it in context.
Fourth, explicitly ask the learner to repeat the word. And fifth, pause for exactly 5 seconds.
It is a perfect closed-loop micro-routine.
Yeah.
And that final step, that 5-second pause, is arguably the most important mechanical feature of this entire blueprint.
Okay, let's really dig into that. Because 5 seconds of dead air in any audio format feels like a massive technical error.
It feels like an eternity.
It really does. If you are listening to this deep dive right now, let's just experience what 5 seconds actually feels like. Ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, starting now. Okay, wow. I couldn't even make it the full 5 seconds. It feels incredibly uncomfortable.
It feels awful.
Why mandate such a long, silent pause?
Well, it feels like an eternity to us because we are fluent, right?
Right.
Our brains process the English language in milliseconds. But this goes back to the physical and neurological reality of the A2 learner.
They're moving at a different speed.
Exactly. For that student, those 5 seconds are not dead air. Those 5 seconds represent the most intense, neurologically active portion of the entire lesson.
Okay, walk us through what is actually happening in their brain during that silence, because it's not just them sitting there.
Not at all. Let's break down the biological sequence.
Yeah.
First, there is the auditory processing phase.
Okay.
The sound wave hits their ear, and their phonological loop, which is the part of working memory that handles sound, has to hold on to that acoustic information and replay it in their head.
Like an instant replay.
Yes. Second, there is cognitive mapping. They have to connect that string of foreign sounds to a conceptual meaning in their brain.
Figuring out what the word actually means?
Right. Third, and this is where it gets highly complex, is motor planning.
Motor planning. Because speaking is basically a physical, athletic act, right?
Absolutely. It's gymnastics for your mouth. The brain's motor cortex has to calculate the exact physical movements required by the diaphragm, the vocal cords, the tongue, the lips, and the jaw to replicate an English sound.
A sound that might not even exist in their native phonetic library.
Exactly. For example, if their native language doesn't have the th sound, like in think or that.
Which a lot of languages don't.
Right. During those 5 seconds, their brain is desperately trying to figure out where to place the tongue against the teeth to make that happen.
They are literally building new physical pathways.
Yes. And finally, the fourth step, after all that planning, they have to actually push the air out of their lungs and physically execute the word out loud.
Wow. When you lay out the sheer number of biological and cognitive steps required, 5 seconds suddenly doesn't seem like enough time.
It's barely enough. If the teacher only pauses for, say, 2 seconds, they interrupt that entire biological sequence.
The learner gets cut off.
Right. They feel rushed. They stumble over their tongue. They fail to produce the word clearly. And immediately, what happens?
The effective filter shoots back up.
Exactly. Their confidence drops.
Yeah.
That psychological safety net we talked about, just tears.
That is so profound. This mandatory 5-second rule, which apparently appears constantly throughout the document, it actually respects the biological speed limits of a learning brain.
It ensures the student always has the time they need to succeed in producing the language. It guarantees a win.
It is literally designing empty space for learning to occur.
Yes.
Okay, so we have isolated vocabulary mapped out. The student is feeling confident, they're mastering single words. But you can't just speak in single isolated words forever.
No, eventually you have to put them together.
Right. At some point, the teacher has to throw the student into the deeper end and make them process continuous language. So how does the blueprint handle that transition?
It moves them into what is essentially a micro-listening comprehension exercise.
A story.
Yes, the document mandates the use of a very short story.
And the constraints here are just incredibly specific again. The story must be strictly between 40 and 80 words long.
Which is tiny.
Right. If we do the math based on those 5 to 12 word sentences from the beginning, that means the entire story is just like 4 to 8 simple sentences.
It is the perfect volume of information.
Why?
Because it provides narrative context, which helps the brain remember vocabulary much better than just memorizing isolated lists.
Humans love stories.
We are wired for them. But it is brief enough that the learner can hold the entire plot in their working memory without losing the thread.
So they don't forget the beginning by the time they reach the end.
Exactly.
But the length isn't even the most interesting part of this step to me. It is the delivery mechanism. The blueprint requires what it calls a 2-speed delivery.
This is a phenomenal piece of instructional architecture.
The teacher must read the story once, slowly, and then immediately they must read the exact same story a second time, naturally.
It's brilliant.
It really reminds me of trying to figure out a complex sleight-of-hand magic trick.
Oh, I like that comparison. How so?
Well, if you just watch a magician perform a card trick in real time, it is a total blur.
Right, it looks like actual magic.
Yeah. You can appreciate it, but you have absolutely no idea how it was done, and you certainly couldn't replicate it yourself.
Yeah.
To understand the mechanics, you need to watch a tutorial where they perform the trick in slow motion.
Right.
You need to see exactly where the thumb goes, how the wrist turns, and how the card slides behind their hand. That slow motion breakdown is the slow read.
That is an excellent analogy because that is exactly what the brain needs.
But a magic trick done in slow motion isn't really a performance, right? It loses its rhythm. To fully grasp the art of it, you have to watch the slow motion breakdown and then immediately watch it performed again at real-time speed to appreciate the flow and the final product.
And that maps perfectly to the linguistics of natural human speech.
Tell me more about that.
Because when native speakers talk, we do not speak in isolated, clearly defined words.
We really don't?
We use connected speech, we blend sounds together, we drop entire syllables, and we alter consonants.
Like, give me an example.
Take a phrase like, "What do you want to do?" In natural spoken English, that completely morphs into, "What do you want to do?"
What do you want to do? Yeah, all one word, basically.
Which, to an A2 learner, just sounds like one long, terrifying superword.
It's just a wall of sound.
Exactly. Natural speech is riddled with phonetic reductions, like the schwa sound, where unstressed vowels just become this lazy sound.
And like instead of two, we say two.
Right. So the slow read serves a very specific purpose. It allows the learner's brain to map the individual vocabulary words they just learned.
They can actually hear the distinct boundaries between the words.
Yes. They can process the grammar. They can understand the actual plot of the 40 to 80 word story.
So they see where the magician's thumb is going.
Exactly. Then the natural read does something entirely different. It shifts the focus from pure comprehension to phonetic exposure.
Training the ear.
It trains their ear for real-world cadence. It exposes them to the rhythm, the intonation, and those tricky linking sounds we just mentioned.
Because when they eventually step away from this safe little audio lesson and speak to a real human being at a coffee shop or like a business meeting, that person is not going to speak to them in a slow motion, highly articulated voice.
No one talks like that in real life.
Yeah.
The natural read bridges the gap between classroom theory and real-world acoustic reality.
And to ensure the student didn't just zone out during the story, the blueprint demands a comprehension check at the end.
Of course. Can't let them off the hook entirely.
Right. The teacher has to ask 3 simple questions about the story, and guess what? Each question is followed by that mandatory 5-second pause.
Input, processing time, output.
It is a relentless, highly structured rhythm.
It really is.
So far, the student has been relatively safe. They have been listening, absorbing, maybe repeating some single words. But now the blueprint forces a major pivot in the lesson.
This is where things get real.
Yeah, we are moving from passive comprehension into active generation. The document forces the learner to start pulling language out of their own brain.
This is the critical transition from theory to practice.
So the document lays out these strict guidelines for speaking practice. It provides the teacher with very specific examples of the types of prompts they are allowed to ask.
Like what?
It lists questions like, what do you think? What do you usually do? Have you ever? And which one do you like?
Oh, notice a pattern there.
Yeah. Looking closely at this list, the blueprint is practically banning the teacher from asking objective, fact-based questions. It is forcing the student to talk exclusively about their own preferences and their own experiences.
It's very personal.
Is that just a strategy to keep the vocabulary simple?
It definitely keeps the vocabulary simple, but it does something much more profound regarding cognitive load.
Back to the bandwidth.
Always back to the bandwidth. Think about the mental energy required to answer a question. If I ask an A2 learner to summarize the plot of a complex movie or, to describe a historical event,
Oh, that's
I am imposing a massive dual burden on them. First, they have to actively construct the ideas, the narrative structure, and the timeline in their head.
You have to remember what actually happened.
Right. Second, they have to translate all of those complex ideas into a foreign language. It is way too much processing at once.
It will just freeze. I would freeze.
Anyone would.
Hmm.
But if I ask them, what do you usually do on Sunday mornings?
Whoa.
I am tapping into their lived reality. The concepts are already fully formed and readily available in their brain.
Right.
They know they drink coffee, they read the news, and they walk the dog. They don't have to invent a concept. They only have to focus on finding the English labels for concepts they already intimately know.
It drastically lowers the barrier to entry for speaking.
Exactly.
I drink coffee. I like dogs. It guarantees that the student actually has something to say, which again reinforces that golden rule, building speaking confidence.
They get the psychological win of successfully communicating a real idea.
But those individual questions are really just the warm-up for what I think is the most ambitious and fascinating requirement in the entire blueprint.
Oh, you're talking about the conversation.
Yes. The document commands the lesson designer to create a simulated conversation.
To attempt this in a pre-recorded one-way audio format is incredibly bold.
It's nuts. Let me explain it for the listeners. The structure dictates a short dialogue, spanning between 5 and 8 turns back and forth.
Right.
So imagine the audio track, right? You have, let's say, a male teacher on the recording and a female learner sitting in her living room trying to improve her English. The sequence works like this. The teacher asks a question. Then, the audio track leaves the learner's part entirely blank, waiting in silence for 5 seconds.
There's that magic number again.
Yep, 5 seconds. And then the blueprint instructs the teacher to continue naturally, as if they just heard the student's response.
It creates this really powerful illusion of a live two-way interaction.
But mechanically, how is that even possible without risking a massive conversational train wreck?
It's tricky.
Because the pre-recorded teacher has absolutely no idea what the student just said in their living room during those 5 seconds of silence.
Not at all.
Like, what if the teacher asks, "What is your favorite food?" The student says, "I love apples." And the pre-recorded teacher replies with, "Wow, that sounds terrible."
That would be disastrous.
It would completely break the illusion and totally ruin the student's confidence.
Which is exactly why this specific constraint demands an incredibly high level of artistry from the lesson writer.
They have to thread a very tiny needle.
Yes. The designer has to craft universally applicable, highly validating responses. You cannot ask a hyper-specific question that demands a binary yes or no answer because you won't know which path the student took.
Right.
You have to design the prompt so that almost any logical A2 level response will seamlessly fit the teacher's pre-recorded reaction.
So the teacher's script has to be a masterclass in supportive ambiguity.
Exactly, supportive ambiguity. Let's imagine a scenario based on 2 people trying to converse about their routines, right?
Okay, lay it on me.
So the male teacher on the audio track says, "I usually drink green tea in the morning to wake up. What is your favorite morning drink?"
Then we get the mandatory 5-second pause. So the female student in her living room might say, "Coffee," or "water," or even, "I don't drink anything."
Right. And then the pre-recorded teacher comes back and says, "Oh, I see. That's a great choice. Well, no matter what we drink, mornings are always a bit rushed, aren't they?"
Oh, wow. That is smooth.
Isn't it?
It flawlessly paves over the unknown. No matter what I said, that's a great choice. Completely validates my contribution. It doesn't matter if I said orange juice or milk.
It is a brilliantly designed illusion.
It really is.
But it isn't just a party trick. It serves a vital pedagogical purpose.
Which is?
Well, for an A2 learner improving their English, vocabulary and grammar are only half the battle. Conversational timing is a massive hurdle.
Oh, totally. Like knowing when to jump in.
Exactly. When do you jump into a conversation? How long do you hold the floor? How do you react to the rhythm of turn-taking? This simulated conversation forces the learner to feel the pressure of someone actually waiting for their reply.
It builds the tension.
And then it gives them the psychological reward of the conversation moving forward because they spoke.
It builds the muscle memory of an actual human exchange. They survive a 5 to 8 turn conversation entirely in English without the safety net of their native language.
Right.
The confidence boost from that must be enormous.
It is the absolute pinnacle of the lesson's psychological design.
Okay, so the student just survived this intense simulated conversation. They're riding high, they feel fluent.
They're feeling great.
But if the lesson just ends there, they might solidify some bad habits.
That's the danger, yes.
They have the fluency, but now the teacher has to sneak in and tighten the bolts on their accuracy. How does the blueprint handle that pivot back to the mechanics?
The blueprint transitions from output back to fine-tuning, starting with a strict focus on pronunciation.
And the rules for this pronunciation phase are just beautifully precise. The teacher must select exactly 5 important words from the lesson.
Not 4, not 6.
Exactly 5. They must repeat each word twice. They must provide one easy sentence using the word. But the instruction that really stands out to me is that the teacher must, quote, tell the learner exactly where to place the stress in the word.
Ah, word stress.
Why is word stress singled out as a critical, mandatory element for an elementary learner?
Because English is what linguists call a stress-timed language,
Stress-timed language.
which is fundamentally different from how many other languages operate around the world.
Break that down for us. What does stress-timed actually mean in practice?
So in many languages, like Spanish, French, or Japanese, the rhythm is syllable-timed.
Syllable time.
Yes, that means every single syllable in a word gets roughly the same amount of time, the same weight, and the same clarity. It is like a metronome ticking evenly. Ta, 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 ta.
Yeah, very even rhythm.
But English does not work like that at all.
We are messy.
Very messy. English is driven by the stress on specific syllables, while the unstressed syllables get crushed, shortened, and mumbled.
Ah, so this goes back to those phonetic reductions and the schwa sound we talked about earlier.
Exactly. If a Spanish speaker, for instance, applies their native syllable-timed rhythm to an English sentence, they might pronounce every single vowel and consonant with perfect clarity.
Which you'd think is a good thing.
You would think, but a native English speaker will actually still struggle to understand them. The rhythm will be completely jarring to our ears.
Give me an example of that.
Take the word photograph.
Okay, photograph.
The stress is heavily on the first syllable, pho to graph. The other syllables are weaker. Now change the word to photographer.
Oh, right. It changes completely.
The stress shifts entirely to the second syllable, pho-to-grapher.
Yeah, photograph.
If an A2 learner says pho-to-grapher, placing the stress in the wrong spot, it completely derails the listener's brain.
Because the listener is waiting for a specific acoustic rhythm that just never arrives.
Exactly. By explicitly isolating and teaching word stress, the teacher is handing the learner the exact mechanical tool they need to transition from sounding robotic to sounding natural.
It proves that fluency isn't just about knowing the definition of a word.
No, it is about knowing the physical music of the word.
The physical music, I love that. It is all interconnected. So we've fine-tuned the physical music of the pronunciation. Now the blueprint brings us to the final review phase.
The wrap-up.
And just like everything else in this architectural plan, the review is governed by incredibly strict numerical quotas.
Always the numbers.
The teacher must review exactly 10 important vocabulary words, exactly 5 useful sentences, and exactly 3 grammar
The
points.
10-5-3 rule.
But looking at this, I see what looks like a glaring contradiction in the blueprint's philosophy.
Well, let's examine that. What is the contradiction?
Well, early in the document, the rules explicitly stated, avoid difficult grammar. And the overarching golden rule was focus on speaking confidence more than grammar perfection. Everything we've discussed so far has been about protecting the student from the anxiety of grammatical rules.
Keeping the effective filter low.
Yes. But here we are at the very end of the lesson, and the blueprint mandates reviewing 3 grammar points.
Ah, I see where you're going.
Why drag grammar back into the spotlight right at the finish line? Doesn't that defeat the whole purpose of lowering the effective filter?
It definitely looks like a contradiction if you view grammar purely as an obstacle.
Which a lot of people do.
But this is actually a masterful piece of instructional sequencing. Notice the exact phrasing of the original rule. It's said to avoid difficult grammar. It never said to abandon grammar entirely,
Hmm. Okay.
because you cannot speak a functional language without grammar, right? Grammar is the underlying operating system that allows the vocabulary to interact.
Without grammar, it's just a pile of words.
Precisely. The genius of this blueprint isn't whether it teaches grammar, but when it teaches it.
So timing is everything.
Think about the traditional high school model again. You walk into class, you sit down, and the teacher immediately writes a complex formula on the whiteboard.
Right.
Today we are learning the present perfect continuous tense. Subject plus have-has plus been plus verbing.
My affective filter is going up just hearing that. I'm already stressed out.
Because you are being asked to memorize an abstract mathematical formula before you have ever experienced what it actually sounds like in the real world.
Right.
That is called deductive learning. Starting with the rule and hoping it applies to the practice later. It is highly intimidating.
Wait, it's backwards.
But look at what this blueprint does. Where does the grammar appear?
At the very end of the lesson.
Exactly. By the time they reach this grammar review, the learner has already successfully listened to a story utilizing these structures, they have answered questions using them, and they have survived a simulated conversation relying on them.
They've been using it the whole time without knowing it.
Yes. Their confidence is at its absolute peak. They know they can communicate.
They already intuitively feel how the language works.
So when the teacher finally introduces the 3 grammar points at the end, they aren't presenting them as these terrifying, abstract hurdles to overcome.
They are just naming what the student already did.
Exactly. They are simply pointing out the structural patterns of the language the student has already successfully used for the last 20 minutes.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It is inductive learning. The grammar acts as a stabilizing reinforcement. It organizes the knowledge they just acquired organically.
It doesn't act as a barrier to entry.
No, it acts as the mortar between the bricks they have already confidently laid down.
That is an incredible distinction. The message to the student isn't, learn this rigid rule so you can hopefully speak one day. The message is, you just spoke beautifully. Here is the mechanical blueprint that explains why it worked so well.
It protects their ego while still delivering the necessary technical data.
It protects the learner's confidence until they are psychologically strong enough to handle the mechanics.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes perfect sense of the contradiction. So the audio portion of the lesson ends on this high, structurally reinforced note.
But we're not quite done.
Right. Because the instructional designers know that human memory is fragile. If the student just takes off their headphones and goes about their day, that new neural pathway will just fade.
Use it or lose it.
Exactly. The blueprint requires a bridge to connect this audio lesson to the learner's daily habits. Which brings us to the final requirement: homework.
Yes, the homework. And the blueprint outlines a 3-pronged homework assignment. And, true to form, it is highly constrained.
Always. The teacher must assign 5 speaking questions, 5 shadowing sentences, and 1 short writing task.
Very specific.
I want to zero in on the second requirement there: 5 shadowing sentences. For the learner listening right now who might not be deep into linguistics, what exactly is shadowing and why is it so effective?
Okay, so shadowing is a highly intensive language learning technique. It was popularized by linguists like Alexander Arguello. The process is simple to describe, but incredibly demanding to execute in reality.
How does it work?
You listen to an audio track of a native speaker, and you attempt to repeat what they're saying almost simultaneously.
Simultaneously.
Yes, you are literally a fraction of a second behind them, acting as their vocal shadow.
Hence the name.
Right. You do not wait for them to finish the sentence and then repeat it from memory. You speak over them, matching their intonation, their speed, their word stress, and their pauses perfectly in real time.
It sounds like trying to sing harmony to a song you've only heard once. It sounds incredibly difficult.
It is intense, but it is the ultimate evolution of a rule that appears earlier in the document. Frequently ask me to repeat after you. Shadowing is the absolute best tool we have for marrying listening comprehension and speaking mechanics.
Because you don't have time to overthink it.
Exactly. It completely bypasses the analytical, translating part of the brain. When you shadow, you don't have the luxury of pausing to think about grammar or conjugations.
You're just trying to keep up.
You are directly targeting the motor neurons, You are building pure muscle memory in your tongue and jaw to produce English sounds automatically.
Wow.
You are absorbing the acoustic reality of the language, the rhythm, the link sounds, the flow, without the interference of your conscious, anxious mind.
It is physical conditioning for language.
Exactly.
And by assigning 5 shadowing sentences as homework, the document ensures that the learner is still actively practicing that critical natural speech rhythm long after the teacher's voice has stopped.
It reinforces the physical music of the language on a daily basis.
And then there is the final piece of the homework architecture, the writing task. Again, the precision here is just stunning.
It's all about the numbers.
The blueprint dictates one short writing task, but it explicitly caps it at exactly 50 words. Why 50 words? Why not ask the student to write a full paragraph or, a diary entry?
Because 50 words is perfectly mathematically calibrated for the stamina of an A2 learner. Yes. Think back to the very first rule we discussed. Sentences must be between 5 and 12 words long.
Right, the cognitive load limit.
50 words means the student is writing roughly 5 to 8 simple sentences.
Which is entirely achievable.
It is enough length to form a complete, coherent thought, but short enough to avoid linguistic fatigue.
Yeah.
If you ask an elementary learner to write a 200-word essay about their weekend, they will quickly run out of vocabulary.
Oh, absolutely. They'll just hit a wall.
They will spend 2 hours on it, get incredibly frustrated, resort to running their native language through a translation app,
We've all been there.
and ultimately they'll just feel defeated. The effective filter goes right back up.
Right.
But if you restrict them to 50 words, they can sit down, focus on the 10 vocabulary words they learned today, apply the 3 grammar points they just reviewed, and finish the entire task in 10 minutes.
They walk away feeling accomplished instead of exhausted.
Exactly. It all comes full circle back to that golden rule. Focus on confidence more than perfection. Every single constraint in this blueprint, from the word counts to the pauses to the homework limits, is engineered to build and protect a psychological safety net.
It is really a masterpiece of design. Let's zoom out and summarize what we've discovered today. We started this deep dive talking about the overwhelming chaos of trying to learn a language, the 100 tennis balls being fired at your head.
A sensory overload.
But by dissecting this specific instructional blueprint, we've seen how a master architect builds a shield.
Right.
We've seen how a 1 to 2 minute warm-up primes the working memory. We've discovered that 5 seconds of silence is actually a massive burst of cognitive and motor activity.
It's where the real work happens.
We learn how a 40 to 80 word story, delivered at 2 different speeds, unlocks the mystery of natural speech. And we saw how a perfectly calibrated, ambiguous, simulated conversation can make an elementary learner feel the thrill of true communication.
The elegance of this document really lies in the empathy of its design.
Empathy, yeah.
It uses strict, almost robotic constraints to create a deeply human learning experience. It never forgets the biological and psychological reality of the person on the other side of the audio track.
And that brings us to the end of our analysis of this A2 blueprint. But before we sign off, we want to leave you, the learner, with a final provocative thought to mull over.
Yeah, this document was explicitly designed for teaching English to beginners, but the underlying framework is completely universal.
It really is.
It is about setting clear, minute goals, breaking complex tasks down into bite-sized, low cognitive load microsteps, relying on strategic repetition, and above all, prioritizing your own confidence over achieving immediate, flawless perfection.
But the question to you is, how could you apply this exact 8-step structure to the next difficult thing you try to learn in your own life?
Think about it.
Whether you are trying to learn Python coding, how to play the guitar, or even how to become a better public speaker, what would happen to your progress if you stopped judging your mistakes and actively built in your own mandatory 5-second pauses for mental processing instead of always rushing to the finish line?
If you respect your brain's processing limits, it changes the entire landscape of how you acquire new skills.
It really does. You stop trying to dodge 100 tennis balls and you start catching them one by one. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the structure of how you learn, keep building those safety nets, and most importantly, keep learning. Until next time.